Well, hi, Eric. I think we're live.
Hey, David.
How are you going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. I think we managed to avoid the echo this week. We're getting the hang of this.
After the fifth go, we're getting the technology down pat. Nice work.
Yeah. Just sneaking in at the last moment. So, where are we going to tonight, Eric?
Okay, so we're starting really around Jerusalem. So Mount of Olives, had a Noster, Garden of Gethsemane, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and then the Garden Tomb. So yeah, we're all in a very close proximity this time.
And we're all in the last week of Jesus' life.
That's right. Yes, we are.
So this is kind of like the crux of the tour. And we organised the tour chronologically so that we ended at this point. And it was a sense of going on a journey, and this was the fitting place to resolve things.
Yeah, it was. It was, and yeah, and it was fantastic. And I think it was interesting in that you don't. I think I said this maybe the first session, how small Israel is, and then how small Jerusalem is. But I mean, obviously everything was walking distance, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It was small just by definition, but yeah.
Take us to the Mount of Olives, Eric.
All right. So Mount of Olives coming up. So you can sort of see here is the map. So it's a bit of a different map because we're all in the close proximity. We're going to use this map this week. So Mount of Olives is here on the right. You sort of see the Temple Mount. So that's where we looked last week, and the Western Wall, just to orientate ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go to the next shot. And this is a view from basically the Temple Mount looking back towards the Mount of Olives. So we were really along this ridge here is where we would get buses to, and that's where those locations were that we're I suppose spent a bit of time, the Garden of Gethsemane and the top of the Mount of Olives. And then this one here is a group shot looking back the other way. So most of the shots that we'll see now will be from the Mount of Olives looking back towards Jerusalem.
Yeah.
You can see the dome there.
Yeah, exactly. Eric, can you jump back too, and I'll explain a couple of things? Great. So if you put your cursor on the Mount of Olives and then you slide out towards Bethany, where would that be?
I think Bethany was around here somewhere.
It's away from Jerusalem. So go directly away from the Golden Gate.
That's right. So they went through the Golden Gate, over the Mount of Olives, and then back towards that way, because we did actually walk to the back of the church and had a look back over the valley, didn't we?
So Bethany is, of course, where Mary and Martha and Lazarus live. And you could go from the Mount of Olives to Bethany. That's where Jesus begins his days. So, before he has the triumphal entry, he's probably staying at Mary, Martha, and Lazarus' place, and then walks to the Mount of Olives and then comes over the hill and into Jerusalem. We'll come back to that because that's kind of important. But if you think, you can sort of see the Church of Ascension, just kind of keep going off screen there. And Bethany's kind of out that way somewhere. Yeah. Next slide. And what we've got here is a whole bunch of graves. There's stacks of graves. We'll come to that. But I think the largest monument you can see there is actually a monument to Absalom. So Absalom is David's son, and he dethrones David towards the end of his life, and David sneaks out of the back of Jerusalem over the Mount of Olives, and then he goes and hides in the desert. And it's the same desert where Jesus spends 40 days and 40 nights. And that's important too. We'll come back to that as well. Let's keep going forwards. Okay,
so this is just a group shot. So this is this isn't the whole tour group. I guess I was trying to think, how many we had on. I think we had, was it about 20, David, or 17?
I seem to remember having to count to 37 or 38, depending on...
Yeah, I was trying to think how many in the bus. So we didn't have a full bus load, did we?
I think it was 37 or 38. So it was a good sized group.
Yeah.
And you get some magnificent views of the city from the Mount of Olives, and you can imagine Jesus looking over the city and praying and contemplating the things that are going to come. And of course, as you look, you see the wall, and that's pretty much the original wall in roughly the same place. And then you can see there the gate. We'll come to the Golden Gate in a minute. And then in the front is more tombs and terraces, and the Kidron Valley is down in between. Explain this perspective to us, Eric.
Yeah, so this is further around the corner. So where we were sitting here looking back towards the wall there. So I've come around the corner a bit here. And this is an old waterway. And I think last week when we talked about Hezekiah's tunnel, I'm guessing this is where the river would have come down into the old part of, and I think this is where the shot came out when we came out of the tunnels. And then again, as David said, you can see all the cemetery along the hill. And there's a couple of other shots where it brings it right up to the outside wall.
Yeah, okay.
So there's a couple more shots basically of the same thing, just giving you, I suppose, a sense of the wall. So where we were a moment ago was around this corner here, where you come around the side of the Temple Mount. You sort of see the old wall as it goes around across there as well, which is a bit like that model we saw last week.
Correct, yeah. And then there's newer parts of Jerusalem outside of the wall.
Yeah, so you sort of see the high rise over here on the horizon.
Yeah, yep.
This is the Golden Gate, David, so this is a bit of a close-up.
Yeah, now the Golden Gate is an ancient gate. So if you remember the book of Ezekiel, the Shekinah, or the glory or the presence of God, departs from the temple. And it moves and it pauses and it moves and it pauses. And one of the places that it pauses just before it leaves the city is at the Eastern Gate. And so there is this sense that the glory of God departs through this gate, and then that actually is the very gate that Jesus enters back into on the triumphal entry. And so there's this sense of a 400-meter race, and we come around and we're back at the same point. And now the glory of God in Jesus is coming back into the temple. And then, of course, there are biblical prophecies in the Old Testament, in Ezekiel and elsewhere, that allude to the fact that Jesus will return through that gate. And that's part of the reason why it's been closed. So I think Suleiman the Magnificent, who was a Turkish Muslim leader in the late 1500s, blocked the gate because he didn't want the Messiah to be able to return through that gate. And it's been shut ever since. So that was a period where the Muslims controlled the city. And the significance of the tombs, Eric, what's that?
Well, because this is the triumphal entry, everyone wants to be at ground zero. So when they get buried, they want to be facing the gate.
Yeah, when Jesus returns, you rise with him and you enter into Jerusalem through that gate. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's the symbolism. Yeah. Okay, next slide.
Just frozen in a moment. Again, so this is the Golden Gate, and it's going down the wall towards where we'll come for the entry where Jesus came in on Palm Sunday.
Yeah, and that's the Kidron Valley. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Again, just shows you the cemetery. So there's a couple of photos here of the cemetery, and you can sort of see. So this, I'm not sure if this is the Absalom one, David.
I'm not sure which one it is, but that's the largest of the monuments. And of course, it wasn't actually built in the time of Absalom, but somehow it's believed that Absalom's grave was marked, and then later they built some sort of a monument to it.
Yeah. And then this one here, again, it shows you that, like, basically the cemetery is right up against the wall all the way along. And there's thousands and thousands of them. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. Yep.
And this part here, so this is a bit of an old ruin. So, I'll go to the next photo, just give you some context. There's a ruin at the front of the wall here. And then this is the pathway, which is believed to be the path that Jesus would have come through when he came to Jerusalem.
Yeah, so if we're thinking the Passion Week, this is like kind of Palm Sunday. So he's walking down from the Mount of Olives, and perhaps this is the beginning of the path where people would have been, celebrating and laying down their coats and the palm branches. Yep.
And the next couple of shots is a place called Robinson's Arch. And really the only reason I had this here was it just showed you another aspect of the wall. So you can sort of see there's lots of steps that go down. And then you can't see in this photograph behind us, there's like a whole heap of steps up the wall. But then also, went too far. Also, they showed you the device that they used to do to make the blocks. So if you go back and have a look at the wall, you can sort of see the size of these blocks, which are the same as the Western Wall blocks, I guess, that we looked at from underground last week.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, of course, is some ruins there of different walls. So we've kind of got walls from the time of David, and then walls from Solomon, and then Hezekiah extends the wall, and then the walls get knocked down, and then the Hasmoneans rebuild it, and Herod builds on top of the Hasmoneans, and then in 70 AD the walls get knocked down again, and then other empires come and rebuild the walls. And so there'll be some descriptions there as to exactly which part of the wall is which, but they're all roughly in the same place. Yeah, and to enter the old town, basically, we had to go through a number of gates, didn't we, David? So, like the accommodation, I think we were going through Dung Gate, which was the gate that we went through. So there's about 5 or 6 gates, which next time we bring up the map, I can show you some of the gates. Yeah. And they're really the entry points into the old city. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All right. So the next one is Paternoster. So for those who know their Latin, Paternoster is Latin for Our Father, which of course is the first 2 lines of the Lord's Prayer. And there's a beautiful chapel which is dedicated to the Lord's Prayer. And we visited it, and you encounter kind of the universality of Christianity's appeal. And so there is the Lord's Prayer cited in hundreds of languages. Have we got some examples of that? Yeah, so you sort of see the archway here on the left. There's plaques along the wall. Here's Anglesi, so this is the English version. So they're all in the same sort of format, like basically an etched tile. Yeah. But this one gives you a shot of some of the different languages. Yeah, that's right. So you can see the different languages there. I don't even know what that language is. But for me, it was kind of cool to go around and find the Dutch one. And so whatever your heritage is, you can see some connection between your heritage and Christians from your country who have gone there in the past. And you can see that tile was put up in 1982. So I suspect that's not an ancient language. Yeah, whereas the one before it is a 1581 is that one there, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And there's another shot here, so it shows you the Armenian, I guess, Armene, and then the Hebrew. Yes, and Armenia is one of the ancient languages that is very, very similar to Hebrew. Yeah, I was looking at the text here. It does look very similar, doesn't it? The way it's structured. Yeah, that's right. So the consonants and they're pretty much the same. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, according so I think there's about 140 languages. So there's 140 plaques throughout the gardens of the cathedral area that are about the Lord's Prayer. Yep. Yep. So the next place we go to is the Garden of Gethsemane. So again, like very close. So we're all in the same sort of area here. So Mount of Olives, Paternoster's there, and then you've got the garden here. Yeah, so you would walk down the Mount of Olives and you would go through the Garden of Gethsemane as you were making your way to the temple. And you can see there the Golden Gate that we were just talking about. That was blocked. Yeah. So this is, I mean, I'm not sure if these are, I wouldn't suggest these are necessarily the trees that were there when Jesus was there, but these trees are about 1,000 years old. So they are very old. Yeah, they're obviously ancient. And again, as an Australian, we rarely encounter kind of trees of this sort of age. But you have this sense that, Jesus could have gone there to pray and, the disciples fall asleep. But it has that sort of withdrawn away from the hustle and bustle of the city, but yet still quite close and accessible. So the guards could have come quite easily and found Jesus.
And I think it was amazing too, like you can sort of see these trees, how ancient they are, that you can actually see through them. So there's like cracks in them, but then you look at the foliage and they were very healthy, and some even had a bit of fruit on, didn't they, David? So
they did, yeah.
Amazing how healthy they really are, considering the state of the trunk.
Yeah, absolutely, very hardy.
And then on this location was another church. It was called the Gethsemane Church, and this is supposedly built around 389 AD. So it's it's one of the oldest churches.
Yeah, so that would be from the time of Constantine's mum, going and kind of finding some of the sites. So I'll explain a little bit more about her in a minute.
So just another shot of the church, and then we go inside the church. And the reason this church was special was because of this thing called the Passion Stone. So you can sort of see in the murals, there's a bit of an image here, and I think the next shot gives a bit of a closer up. So this is supposedly the location where Jesus wept in the garden. So you can sort of see the olive trees around here, and there he's reclining, I guess, against this stone. And this is what the church has been built on top of this stone location.
Yeah, so it's where he's weeping over Jerusalem, and this relief is trying to kind of capture that. And then there would be other garden scenes as well in murals.
Yeah, and then you can sort of see at the back here, there's a couple of garden scenes there, yeah. So it was actually a beautiful church with the way they had done, I guess it looked like it was tiles and painting across the ceiling. So it was a beautiful church.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. The next location is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Yeah. And so we are inside the city walls, you will note, but we were outside the old city wall in the time of Jesus in the 1st century. So the city wall would have been in a different place. It wouldn't have gone so far back up. It would have basically run along where the Via Dolorosa is and then kind of turned around the corner. And then joined up with the Tower of David and the City of David, the ancient part of the city. Yeah. So take us to the Holy Sepulchre.
So like last week, we did a bit of a night tour. So this is from the outside. And it was actually really great to get there on the outside, because when we went on the day, this courtyard was absolutely teeming with people. So it was actually, and this is basically, so it's sort of like a bit hidden away, really. Like we go through these doors to go inside the cathedral.
Yeah. Now, whenever you're in Israel, you get the question, is this the genuine site? Or did Constantine's mum just kind of pick something out of the clouds and say, we'll call this the spot? And here's kind of what we know. So in the New Testament, we already get the picture from the book of Acts, for instance, that there's a lot of Christians in Jerusalem. James remains there, and it's a very important city for Christians initially, up until Jerusalem is destroyed in 70 AD. In about 110, 120 AD, there's an emperor called Hadrian. Hadrian is quite a powerful emperor who reconstructs a whole lot of Jerusalem. He's also quite anti-Christian. He's strongly pagan. And so Hadrian actually goes to the sites where the Christians have continuously been worshipping. So Christians, since the New Testament times, have been celebrating a certain location as the place where Jesus was crucified. And in order to try and distance the Christian connection with the location, he builds a pagan temple on that very location. And this happens elsewhere. But then when Constantine's mum comes back, she actually knows that where Hadrian's temple is most likely the location of Golgotha, of where it is that Jesus is crucified. And so that's the strongest connection we have with the evidence for this being the place where Jesus is crucified. What are we looking at here, Eric?
So you can basically just see a bit of a statue of Jesus on the cross. It's very ornate, so you can sort of see these little candle, little incense holders around the church. So it's very, I suppose it's different to the type of cathedral we're used to. And then the walls have lots of these type of mosaics. So you can sort of see someone carrying the cross. And, you look at the paintings, they don't actually look, the nationality, they sort of don't look Israeli, do they, David?
Yeah. They look somewhat Asian. And I think there's a sense in which as the Christians are coming back, and there are Christians already in China in the 400s. So the gospel goes, the Eastern Church follows the Silk Road. And so the gospel goes into India and China. And so, for instance, one of Genghis Khan's generals is a Christian. Now, that's later, of course, but that's just evidence of Christianity kind of getting as far as China. And people would have been making pilgrimages from all sorts of places. So that's kind of captured in this relief, in this painting. Oddly enough, Eric, did you take the previous photo?
This one?
No, the one back?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you missed the most important bit, because below this, from memory, is actually where the stone is supposed to be, part of the rock. At the bottom of Golgotha.
You can sort of see down here, what I was trying to do was not get people's heads in there. So I was trying to get it was like very crowded. And in this COVID world, it's hard to imagine how crowded it was.
It was packed. Yeah. And I'll come to that in a minute. But there's like thousands of people packed into this church, and they're coming from all over the world, precisely like that painting. That's what's going on at this place. That is kind of celebrating where they believe the cross was.
I guess different reliefs play out the story of the. I guess whether it's Herod or Pilate, a bit of a trial going on here.
Yeah, and I would presume that that's Jesus' coat being taken from him, and it's not being cut, but it's kind of being sold as kind of one sort of piece. Yeah.
And the next shots are just a whole heap of different shots, I guess, to show you how beautiful and ornate it is.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of trouble, really, for this location. And I guess in Jerusalem, it's probably seen as the most sacred site, really, isn't it, from a religious perspective?
Absolutely. So you've got, for Jews, for Christians, and for Muslims, their third most sacred site, all in the one city. So three of the major top 6 faiths all have got some traction, some history and connection with Jerusalem. And this building is part owned by the Catholics and part owned by the Protestants. And that just kind of shows you there. And there's Rex, he's a member of our team there in the foreground. Yeah.
The next couple of shots were a cave. So interestingly, and I sort of, this didn't really sit well with me, I guess, to say it was very convenient to have the tomb and the place of crucifixion in the one location.
Yeah, and again, you do ask yourself, how do we know, right? Because there's lots of caves around there, and I think for a while they used to actually extract stone from there, and that's part of the reason why there's all these caves. So how do you know this is the cave? And the answer that's given is, and there's a member of our team.
Kira,
Kira, that's right, yes. And she is kind of popping in to try and see if Jesus' body's there. But the answer is, it kind of goes back to Christians and then Hadrian and then Constantine's mother. And that would be the heritage that suggests that this is the location. Whether or not it's the exact location, it's the kind of place that Jesus would have been buried.
Yeah, and I think when I was reading some of the literature, it was saying that when, like you said, David, they had a pagan temple. They removed the pagan temple. When they did that, they found the cave. So it wasn't like they knew the caves were there necessarily at the start. They sort of discovered as they went through the process. But
yeah, so there's some evidence, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a perfect segue, because the next place we go to is the Garden Tomb.
Yeah, that is a great segue. So the Garden Tomb is a rival destination or location for the Garden Tomb. And so you kind of get to, but before we go there, just keep it on that map.
Oh, sorry, yep.
No, that map. Yep. So just imagine we're back on top of the Mount of Olives, and Jesus is up there and he's contemplating going into Jerusalem. He knows precisely what's going to happen. He's conscious that he's going to be put on trial and that he'll be crucified. And then every day he's kind of tracking back to Bethany. And then if he goes past Bethany, he ends up in the Judean desert, where he spent 40 days and 40 nights, and he knows his way around, where David got lost when he was trying to flee from his son Absalom. And it just struck me, and I'd never appreciated this, but kind of as Jesus is praying in the garden, there's this temptation of, if I just run up the hill and kind of another few kilometers down the road, I could avoid all of this. And it's very real. And he would have known the desert, and it's part of Israel's history that you can hide there, and he chooses not to. So it just kind of, that was, as I was sitting on the side of the Mount of Olives one day, I just kind of, that thought dawned on me, and it never had before. And it was quite a powerful moment.
Yeah, so it's like he could have escaped, basically. He could have...
Yeah, if it's possible, take this cup of suffering from me, and it is possible. I've just got to do a runner, and they'll never be able to find me. Yeah, but of course he doesn't. All right, so let's go to the rival site.
So here we are. So I put this shot in here because basically the reason it's a rival site is because they talk about this. So it was a German archaeologist who thought, well, maybe Golgotha could have been a rock. And they thought this rock looked like a skull rock with basically some of the holes that were in it to sort of make it look like eyes.
So they imagined those two indents to be eyes, and then kind of an upper lip. So they thought, okay, this place might have been called the Skull or Golgotha, and perhaps this is where the garden could have been. Yeah,
and that was back in the 1840s. And then really, I guess the thing that was interesting was that the garden tomb we're looking at in a moment, this was actually next door to it. So it's not actually where we are, because out here was actually a bus stop. Or bus storage, wasn't it? So bus stop, bus storage there.
Yeah, it was a bus depot. And so it wasn't a sacred site, but it kind of captured this archaeologist's attention, and he did some more digging around, and he came up with what he thought was more evidence. Have we got some of that?
Yeah, so then here's some old photos. It basically just shows the tomb. You can sort of see a bit of the door that's cut out here. And then we go into modern day, and you can sort of see here it is here. So this is the tomb that we actually visited. And I guess at that point, it's sort of this point, it doesn't really matter where it is, the right location, not anymore. It does it, David. It's more about the feel and,
And what's nice about this site is that it's secluded, it's garden-like, it's quiet, it's contemplative. Pretty much only Protestants go here. And so the hustle and bustle of thousands of people that you experience at the Holy Sepulchre doesn't distract you. You're able to kind of contemplate more. Let me just jump back. You don't have to go back in the photos, but I remember, do you remember I think they were Filipino nuns when we were in the Holy Sepulchre, Eric? And there was a rock where they thought the women laid Jesus' body, and they prepared it, and they put the oils on it. And there were these, I think they were Filipino nuns, and they were bringing cloths and they were rubbing these cloths onto the stone because they wanted to take them back to their sick grandmother, or just sick family member, whomever it was. And there's a belief in Catholicism, I forget the name for the cloth, it has a special name. There's a belief in kind of traditional Catholicism that somehow a special cloth has healing powers. And so you're sitting there watching this and you're conscious that the Jesus story is a story that has a lot of cultural manifestations and dimensions to it that we don't experience or appreciate as Westerners. We have a particular take on the gospel. Now, I'm not saying the Filipino nuns had it right, but it is interesting to just watch the way the different cultures have engaged with the potential burial side of Jesus and how that impacts their spirituality.
And I remember us talking about this actually, like it was like the Eastern Orthodox view, and exactly that, whether it was relic, they do the relics and they go around to all the different sites and they would try to take things back to all their sick people, how different their religious practices were to us, but it was still an amazing universal belief. Like it sort of broadens your mind a bit, I think, in what our faith is, because I think I've never really travelled that much really, so my view of Christianity was a Western-based view, and to actually to sort of see that as a universal faith, it's different and people practice it differently. It was actually really, 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 I suppose, almost liberating in a way that, not my view.
Yeah, absolutely. It did broaden your mind. So here we are standing at another rival tomb site, and there's some members of our team in there. And next slide.
So family photo, David, I thought I'd pop that in there. So Mackie, your mum, and Alison, your sister.
Yes, just because you come on tour with me doesn't mean I give you lots of hugs. That's my sister and my mother. So there you go. Yes, and we're standing together, and we did this journey together. It was a wonderful experience.
And the next shot here is I guess in the Crusade. So I took this as the inside of the tomb, so you sort of see the stones being cut out where I guess they would lay the body or bodies in the tombs, because quite often they would have more than one body in there, like they'd have little cutouts for them. And then there was this Crusade mark on the wall here, David.
Yeah, so you do. You bury a body and then you might go back in when the next relative dies and you take the bones and you put the bones in a pile and then you lay the new body out. And that's how a family grave kind of works. And even though this site was kind of discovered in the mid-1800s, part of their evidence for thinking that it has a longer history is that they found some Crusade markings inside. And so they're now, of course, contending that, look, there's evidence that the Crusades, which are kind of happening from the 1050 onwards, think that this site is somehow significant. So, yeah, there was just more evidence of Christians over centuries being drawn to Jerusalem.
And that's the final slide. So the next two are really about your future plans.
Yes, so I hope you've enjoyed our online tour. For those of you who it might be an option, I'm planning to do another face-to-face tour, we would call it now. So the way restrictions are looking, international travel is coming back on the agenda. Israel's a highly vaccinated country, 80+%, and one imagines that it will be one of the earlier places to come on the possible destination list. So I'm planning, penciling in, shall we say, I don't think we can do any more than that, another tour of Israel. It would cost something like $3,000 plus flights, and it's a bit hard to predict what flights are going to be at the moment. That is a great price, let me tell you. Feel free to go online and check out what other people charge, and they would charge more than that. And here's what you would kind of get as part of that. 11 nights accommodation, breakfast and dinner every day. And that's actually fun because when you're on a tour with a group of people from your church, and you're getting to know them and you get to sit down and have dinner and debrief the day. And there's a sense in which you're on a pilgrimage as part of a bigger group. And that kind of makes breakfast and dinner part of the rhythm and the routine of the day. Lunches, 3 of the days, and then other days you have to order your own. So for instance, when you have St. Peter's fish, you need to order yourself there. The coach, a driver, a local tour guide, and you can access the tour guide and ask him questions direct, or her, and then entrance fees to most of the locations. So actually, there isn't a whole lot of expense on top of the $3,000. It's a pretty all-inclusive kind of cost. So if that's a possibility, you could email the office at daptoanglican.org.au and express your interest, and we'll put you on some kind of a list and we'll email you out some updates about that. Now, Eric, I did run a tour 2 and a bit years ago, and I said at the end of that tour that we would have another tour, which because of COVID we haven't been able to do.
Which is this next one?
The next one.
And I've gone the wrong way. What's happening here? There we go. That's right. Greece and Turkey.
So if you're one of the new Pen crew who's watching on, I still plan to do the Greece-Turkey tour that I talked about. And I'm thinking that Israel should come first because they have higher vaccination rates, and you can imagine that coming online earlier as a travel destination. However, I'm anticipating that September, October of 2023, we might do a Greece-Turkey tour, and we're following Paul and some of his missionary journeys and a little bit of John the Evangelist as well. And the kind of places we would be visiting would include Athens, Corinth, Thessalonica, Philippi, Istanbul, Pergamum, Ephesus, and Patmos, to name of the highlights. There would be some other places as well. And that's magnificent too. Eric, we did a bit of prep for that, and we actually went to Ephesus, didn't we?
We did. Ephesus was a fabulous location to visit. We went to Istanbul as well, and that was a beautiful city to visit too.
Yeah, and we went to Pergamum as well. That was where there was the temple up on the hill.
Yeah, the chairlift. Yeah.
That's correct. That's the one. So that might also be a possibility for you. I don't know what your plans are, but if you're one of those people who's itching to get back to traveling, here's a couple of suggestions for you. Again, just email office@daptoanglican.org.au, express your interest, and we'll keep you updated. Eric, it's been...
I think I've lost you, David.
And our trip together. Oh, well, I think that ends our tour, Eric. So we might finish up there.
Thanks, David. Sorry, I cut out there, so I didn't capture all that, but I've really enjoyed the opportunity for the last 5 weeks. Thanks for rekindling our fond memories from the trip. It was a fabulous trip, and look forward to the next one.
It's unstable again.